wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Welcome to the Sunday Stoic Podcast, the podcast where we apply ancient philosophy to modern life. I'm Steve, and unlike some of the other podcasts out there where you have experts coming at you, I'm just a normal guy trying to learn to be a better man. And I share with you my few insights and just concepts from reading and applying this ancient philosophy to modern life. Now, this week, I'm going to do a little something different. As this episode airs in July 2019, I will be in Michigan enjoying a vacation with my family. But also, this time of year made me, and especially this year because it's the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing, made me reminisce a little bit. And I thought I would take a break from a normal episode and talk a little bit about one of my heroes. So we know in Stoicism that we are to have mentors, to think of great people that we can kind of aim for, kind of think of their character. We can think about them watching us and think about what advice they might give us on a daily basis. We can also just think of their character and figure out how we can be more like them. I grew up in a small town. I went to high school in a town called Salina, Ohio. Okay, so we're talking about the western half of Ohio on the Indiana border. And it's flat, it's farmlands. My family had a farm there. And if you go to the view from above, if you will, if you don't mind a Stoic metaphor, so zoom out of Salina a bit. There's a large lake right next to Salina, and our family farms on the south side of that lake. And as you continue around the lake, you run into the town of St. Mary's, Ohio. And then a little bit outside of St. Mary's, Ohio, is the town of Wapakoneta, Ohio. So that's my region. If you zoom out further, the nearest city is Lima. If you zoom out even further, you'll eventually run into Dayton. And to the north, eventually Toledo. Okay? So kind of mid-state on that Indiana line, basically. Now, let me describe the area. Like I said, cornfields. It's known as the land of the cross-tipped churches because there's a lot of little towns scattered around, all of them with, well, not all Catholic, but primarily a lot of Catholic churches with steeples with crosses on top. And you can usually see about 3 or 4 of those churches from any place in the county. Okay, so it's flat, so the steeples are visible in the distance. And like I said, large lake right there. The people are, primarily from an agricultural background. And then, of course, the town by my house was 10,000 people big. That's the size of the town in my home county there, where I lived. I didn't live in the town. I lived outside of town on the south side of that lake I told you about. So I was into science as a kid, and that was my subject that I was great at. Never been a great writer, never been a great mathematician, unfortunately, which would have helped my science, of course. But I was into science. I liked science, especially biology. I grew up hunting and fishing and taking care of farm animals and things and running around in the woods on the farm there and really enjoyed that aspect of life. The idea of learning new things. I like to read books. I like to watch documentaries and all of that. No one in my immediate family was like that. My parents didn't really read books, hardly ever. My uncle did, but he had a degree from college. My parents didn't go to college. My uncle did. He was a little rough around the edges though, but he liked earth science, so he taught me a little bit about like fossils and things. He's one of my, of course my parents shaped who I am, but my uncle helped steer me towards science a bit because of his interest in it. But then one of my heroes was Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong, as you I hope know, the first one of the first two people to land on the moon and the first one to walk on the moon. He was an interesting guy, and I heard a lot about him as a kid because he grew up basically 2 towns over from where I grew up. So you heard about him a lot. We went to the museum dedicated to him. The airport down the road was dedicated to him. And, you know, it was just really cool to know that someone who had done something amazing and somewhat sciencey grew up in the same cornfield I did. And later in life, well, not too late, I guess, when I was about, I was a teenager. Actually, it was 25 years ago, probably this week, come to think of it. They had an air show at Neil Armstrong Airport, which is just a little airport. You can look it up. It's tiny. They had an air show there, and I was in Civil Air Patrol at the time. That's the civilian auxiliary of the Air Force. It's like a sort of military-ish Boy Scouts. There's no firearms involved, but you wear the same uniform as the Air Force, basically, and you do search and rescue and things like that. So we went to this air show, and we did flight line duty. That meant I'm a high school student or junior high school student at the time, and my job is to stand between the public and the airplanes to make sure no one steps in front of a propeller. Okay, that's my job. And we go to this thing, and we're standing there doing our job, and they have a little air show, and they have right behind us is a stage and a guy with a microphone saying, "Oh, and up next we have an airplane going to do a barrel roll. Oh, isn't that amazing?" or whatever. And they say, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today." And this air show was in honor of the 25th anniversary of the moon landing. And who walks on stage but Neil Armstrong? So Neil Armstrong standing behind me and gave us a little speech about the moon landing. You know, he wasn't a man of tons of words, but he was a humble guy, and he gave a little talk, and he mostly commented about the airplanes in the air show, like, "Oh, look at that!" And he said, like, I remember he said that airplane's fighting a crosswind. You know, so he said something like, "Once you're in space, there aren't any crosswinds, so we had it easy," you know, making comments like that. And he waved at some people. He signed autographs and everything. And I thought about running up to him to get his autograph, but I just waved at him. On retrospect, that autograph would have been worth some money, but also I think it's more dignified not to have bugged the guy, for one. Anyway, but I got to see him, and that was really powerful because I had never met anyone or been near anyone that famous before. Not that fame, as we know as practitioners of Stoicism, is a good thing, but he wasn't just famous. I admired him as well. And so later on, I read the book, and I recommend, if you ever have time, the book First Man by James R. Hanson. It's the only authorized biography of Neil Armstrong, and so it has a lot of interviews with Neil that were involved in its writing, as well as his family, etc. They made that recent movie based on part of the book, but the Neil Armstrong in that movie is based on reality in some ways, but there's a lot of liberties taken. I noticed in the film, or in reviews of the film, they talk a lot about how stoic he was, at lowercase s stoic, so, not showing emotions, and that's not exactly the reality of the situation. He had a lot of characters that I admire and wish I had in myself, but and I'm sure he did, perhaps as an astronaut and fighter pilot, etc., lock away maybe more of those emotions than he should have. But when you read about him, as a kid, he read books a lot. He was into reading and learning. And he loved airplanes, and I grew up, reading and loving airplanes, and although I didn't pursue it much, but he did, and he went off to the military. I tried to join the military. I was rejected because my heartbeat was too fast. but he lived, he and my grandma were probably school kids together at some point, and because she lived in St. Mary's, Ohio, around the same time he did, and then he later moved to Wapak, which is just down the road, and just knowing that interaction was cool. But he was into science, he was into learning, and he was kind of his own guy. I really appreciate being your own person as much as possible. For example, his parents were very devoutly, I forget which form of Christianity, but very religious. And at one point he became a Boy Scout master, or he applied to be a Boy Scout master, and they asked him his religion, and he said he was a deist. So he wasn't afraid to be his own person, like say, well, I was raised this way, but I believe, in this. And so he claimed deism as his religion in that case. So, just those sorts of things were just interesting to me. And learning about his character, he didn't really get angry. He was really good he could be a very, kind of a strong, silent leader. He wouldn't lose his temper. He had strong ideas and could be kind of stubborn, but he was very smart, soft-spoken, only spoke when it was necessary. And the other thing that I really admire about him is his unshakable resolve. For example, he was flying, I forget the name of it, right? The flying bed stand or whatever they called it. It was this practice rocket thing that was simulating landing on the moon. And he was flying it, trying to practice landing on the moon. And the engine quit. He ejected. The whole thing blew up. If he would have waited like 2 more seconds to eject, he would have been dead. He parachutes to the ground. Most people would have been all shook up, taking the day off work or a week off work or whatever. He went back to the office and filled out paperwork and went back to work like immediately, saying, well, this is just part of the job. Doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop, I thought that was pretty amazing. That kind of fortitude, that kind of resolve. And then also, the other thing I really admired about Neil was that he could have been the richest and most famous person on earth. I believe it was Penn Jillette who said, imagine if he had just stepped out on the moon and said, hey, drink Coke, right? He instantly would have been a very, very rich person. And all throughout his life, he did make public appearances, but he did not become a celebrity in the sense that he was, you never saw Neil Armstrong on Dancing with the Stars. He rarely made television appearances. He appeared when he wanted to. Other than that, he went back to his farm. He flew gliders. He served on the board of directors for some companies and some charitable organizations and things, and he lived his life in dignity, and then passed away a few years ago. And so I've just admired Neil Armstrong for that, and I just wanted to share that experience and my interest in Neil. Before I go, I guess one other example of his ability to just think clearly under pressure and not freak out, just do what needed to be done, which is a very Stoic thing, was when he was on a Gemini mission, Gemini 8, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And they were trying to dock with a spacecraft for the first time in history. And they did dock. They docked the 2 spacecraft together. But then something went wrong, and they started spinning, and I think there was a thruster stuck open, and they were just spinning rapidly, and so much so that it was probably just a blur. Like everything around you was just a blur. But he was so practiced and so resolute and kept his cool well enough. He reached up, even though it would have been really difficult, and flipped the right switches to save the day, right? And so just having that ability to stay cool, stay calm, collected, and do what needed done, is something worth thinking about. Anyway, so you can think about who your mentors are. Who are the folks you admire? They don't have to be perfect human beings, because guess what? If you try to pick a perfect human to be your mentor, you won't have any mentors. But for me, Neil Armstrong exemplifies a lot of the qualities that part of it is I see myself in part of him, like his background and his love of books and things, and being a little different than the people around him. And then I see all these other qualities he showed that I wish I had. And so that makes a good mentor. So who are your mentors? Email me at sundaystoic@gmail.com, or post on Facebook, Sunday Stoic, or on Twitter at Sunday Stoic. Tell me who your mentors are. And until I see you again, think about it. Live up to those mentors as much as you can. but don't forget to seize the day and enjoy life. Carpe diem. One more thing before I go. At the end of the episode, I'm going to record a song. I'm just going to do one take, so it won't be perfect, and I can't sing very well anyway, but I'll do one take of a song that I wrote the week Neil Armstrong passed away as kind of a tribute to one of my heroes. Nervously sipping my coffee in a small Ohio airport, talking with a stranger about airplanes, Aronkas, Cubs, and so forth. I said, today's my first cross country. I'm so nervous, can't wait till it's done. The stranger smiled broad and said, I bet you'll enjoy your flight, son. Well, the old man was right, it was a hell of a flight over green woods and gold cornfields. At 2,000 feet, that's when it struck me, I had been talking to Neil. He said, soaring through life sure ain't a breeze with the wind full in your face. If you fly high, it'll get easy. There are no crosswinds out in space. The fun's in the flight, not in walking. Enjoy the ride, it's over so soon, said the soft-spoken man who leapt off the farm and put his prints on the moon. Though he didn't say much to me, I flew away a little more wise. Reach for the stars, and if you fall short, you'll still touch the sky. One day I will turn downwind and drop my flaps, calling on the radio. And once I'm done, it's a full stop, there are no touch and goes. On a dark, dark night, I gaze at the light of a million distant stars, hoping that in my day I'll see the first footprints on Mars. Soaring through life sure ain't a breeze with the wind full in your face. If you fly high, it'll get easy. There are no crosswinds up in space. The fun's in the flight, not in walking. Enjoy the ride, it's over so soon, said the soft-spoken man who leapt off the farm and put his prints on the moon. Well, I think of him still, and I always will. Now he's up and flown away, but in his example I'll fly on to the dawn of a new day. When I pull on the yoke, pitch up the nose, I remember what I learned from that man. And I'll dream as big as the sky around me until I have to land. Well, soaring through life isn't a breeze with the wind full in your face. If you fly high, it'll get easy. There are no crosswinds up in space. The fun's in the flight, not in walking. Enjoy the ride, it's over so soon, said the soft-spoken man who leapt off the farm and put his prints on the moon.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com or by leaving a voicemail at 501-503-3132. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe Diem.